making another reading update. I read a lot this week. I've been really sort of pouring myself into books at the moment, and they've been quite a comfort to me recently. But before I talk about what I read, I'm going to talk about something else bookish that I did this week. I gave away a bunch of books, I went to the secondhand bookstore, like my local secondhand bookstore, and I gave them like, I didn't count them, like at least 20 books. I should have counted them, but yeah, it was very nerve-wracking. I've never like given away books like that before, particularly not that many all at once. But it was also really, really wonderful. I got like store credit, so I could sort of browse and just pick a book, really, because it wasn't really costing me money. I mean, it technically was costing me money, kind of, but it didn't feel like it was costing me money. I just got to pick a book and then leave. I'm doing this sort of, purging, because I really want to get to a point where I don't have any read books or unread books on my shelves. And I know lots of people on BookTube talk about this, and I've been wanting to do it for a very long time, but I'm only now actually taking active steps to get there, because I just want to try it. I just want to know what that's like to not have any unread books on my shelf, and I can just go, like, I could just be free to find out what my natural reading habits are. Do I prefer having a bunch of unread books on my shelf? Is that like my natural state? Do I like reading one book at a time? I don't really know, because ever since I started reading, I started with a bunch of books that I wanted to read, So yeah, I just want to try it, and I still have unread books on my shelf. I didn't get rid of all of them, obviously, but I'm a lot closer to having no unread books than I was, last week. And I don't know, it's just how I want to read now, because I want to be able to, because at the moment when I'm looking through a bookstore or the library or whatever, I'm like, or not so much the library, but when I'm looking through bookstores or online, I'm like, could I see myself reading this, like wanting to read this some time down the future? Which the answer is almost always yes. It's like, yes, I can. I like books, so this is a book. I can probably see myself enjoying it sometime in the future. And that's just a terrible filtering system, because it means I bring home so many more books than I could ever read. And so I want my filtering system now to be like, can I go home and do I feel like going home and reading this like right now? Do I need to borrow this, or do I need to buy this because I want to read it right now? Because that's just a much more effective filtering system that a lot less will get through. And like the thing with having a book and having full intention to read it in the future is that you have to sort of sustain the excitement for it. Like, it's like, I'm excited for this now, and I have to sustain it for months until I can actually get to the point where I'm reading it. And it's not just that one book, it's, all the unread books on my shelf. I'm having to sustain excitement for them, and that excitement can so easily turn into anxiety. And for me, anyway, maybe, I know there are people that have hundreds of unread books on their shelves, and they, do just fine. Like, that's how they like that, that excites them. For me, it doesn't excite me. It makes me anxious. And I only have, now I only have about 5 or 6, I'm not sure, books on my shelf that are unread, which is, it's amazing. Already I feel the difference. Anyway, so yes, I went to the bookstore and I got credit, and I said, okay, I'm just going to buy, I had like enough credit, because after, giving them 20 books, I had a fair amount of credit. And I said, okay, I'm only going to buy one book. And I looked around and I couldn't find anything until I was walking out the door and I saw this in the corner of my eye. This is 1222 by Anne Holt. I had heard of this and I was excited for it, and it was also very short, so I was like, yes. This book is a mystery, I guess, yeah, it is a mystery. Mystery crime novel from Norway, so it's translated fiction, yes, which is something that I'm wanting to read more of. The protagonist is very interesting. I really like her. She's in a wheelchair, which I wish in every genre there were more disabled protagonists. I really do. It's something that I feel so strongly about. You know, whenever we discuss diversity in reading, it's often about, you know, read women, read authors of colour, read LGBT books, you know. I feel like disability often gets swept aside, and which is ridiculous because so many people are disabled. I think it's because it's an uncomfortable topic for many. Anyway, but I liked this protagonist. She wasn't wonderful. Like, I love people who are disabled that aren't great people. Like, because shitty people get disabled too. Like, often it's a trope to make a disabled person an inspiration for all, and that just annoys me to no end. But she was kind of awful. She was like sandpaper. She just sort of rubbed up against everyone that she met, and that sounds a bit odd. But anyway, yeah, she was kind of awful, and I probably would hate her if I met her in real life. And I love characters like that. In terms of the plot, I should probably tell you the synopsis. Pretty much, she is an ex-policeman, and she is on a train going up into the mountains in Norway. So it's snowing, and it's, you know, very cold. And then the train gets into an accident, and they have to be moved to a local hotel. And it's, you know, really remote, you know, not many people around there. And so there's, you know, this train load of people stuck in this hostel while this hurricane swirls around them because it's this massive storm. And that was great. The atmosphere was fantastic in this novel. You know, they're stuck in this hotel, and you just sort of you can hear the like storm swirling around them, and you're just sort of waiting for things to crack. You know, it was a great atmosphere. I felt like I was in this hotel. You know how like there's some books where like I'm reading it and I'm very aware that like I am a reader and I am reading, and then there's other books that I just fall into and I forget about my own reality. I forget about me being a person and I'm just there in the book. That happened with this, which is a sign to me, because it doesn't always happen, it's a sign to me that this had a fantastic setting and atmosphere and stuff like that. But one thing I liked that Anne Holt did is she didn't lay it on too thick. Like, the people in the story are not that, they're not creepy, they're just like normal people, because that's what happens when there's like an accident or something. People tend to just, you know, move on and, you know, carry on with their lives, and they're not weird, you know what I mean? Like, when you're stuck in this situation with other people, excuse me, they tend to just be normal people, you know? And so I really liked that, because what happens, like I said, it's a crime, it's a mystery novel, a crime happens, and then Han, who is the main character, she, being the ex-police officer, sort of gets roped into helping solve this crime. And what I liked about it is that, you know, she didn't make the author, she didn't make everyone creepy. Instead, she made them all normal people, because it's a lot harder to find a criminal if they all seem normal. Like, I really liked that. I will say I was really loving it for the first like 200 pages, and then the last 100 was just a bit disappointing to me. The mystery was surprising. I didn't pick it. I didn't pick the criminal. So I enjoyed the reveal, but the way it was revealed was really like amateur. Like, I felt like it, sort of spoiler alert, I won't spoil the mystery, but I'll tell you how the mystery is revealed, if that makes sense. Pretty much at the end, the last couple of chapters were just the main character, you know, being surrounded by a bunch of people, and she's like, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and I felt like for the last few chapters I was transported into like a 1930s mystery novel, you know what I mean? Like Agatha Christie, everyone in a room, you know, I just felt like it didn't fit. It didn't make sense. I doubt that's how mysteries, because for the most part, it felt like a really contemporary, modern style, Agatha Christie style. Like, it was this blend between Agatha Christie style mysteries and you know, a modern contemporary feel. And then at the end, it just felt like really outdated way of revealing a mystery. So that was a little disappointing, but I was engaged the whole way through, and I did enjoy it. So, and I would recommend it actually, and I wouldn't mind reading more from this author. And I checked in the library, and they actually have a couple more of her books that have been translated into English, so that's exciting. So yeah, I gave this 3 stars. Excuse me. The other book that I finished this week it's not really a book, it's The Power of Vulnerability by Brene Brown. Now, Brene Brown, you may have heard of her because she did a fantastic TED Talk years ago, and it went viral. I will link it down below because it is a great TED Talk. And I sort of felt like, since I just finished Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed, this felt like a great continuation to read some of Brene Brown's work. So, okay, this is it's a bit weird. The Power of Vulnerability isn't actually a book, it's an audio experience. It's a set of seminars she did that were recorded. So it's just her talking, it's just her presenting. It's not actually technically a book, but it is on Goodreads, so I'm going to talk about it. She talks about things like fear, vulnerability, shame, and what she calls wholehearted living, which is people who have figured out how to live with fear and vulnerability and shame. So here's the thing. This book was kind of difficult for me to get a read on because I understood everything that she said, and what she says is very... She puts a name to things that we've all felt, but I felt like she was a bit vague. She would put lots of words and lots of definitions out there to sort of, she says she wants to begin a discussion on shame, but then she wouldn't actually say, she didn't have concrete ways of how to deal with them. She didn't have concrete, she actually had like 10 guideposts on how to live wholeheartedly, as she says. But they were just very, very vague, and because it was her just speaking, it wasn't from a book, she would go off into these stories, and she's a very excellent presenter. She's very funny and engaging and earnest, and it's just really, she's lovely to listen to. I listened to hours at a time because she was so engaging. But when I actually came out of the end of the novel, I felt very, very confused. I felt like I got a, watercolour painting of, the ideas that she was presenting, but what I actually needed was, a really detailed oil painting to understand, like, crystal clear ideas of how to implement this way of living into your life, and then crystal, like, concrete examples of those concrete ideas. But I didn't get that, and I'm wondering if it's because it was just her speaking at a seminar, so she could go off on all these tangents. I'm wondering if perhaps one of her novels would be better for me because they would have to be more structured. But at the same time, I just feel a bit overwhelmed and a bit bombarded with all of this new lingo that she presents to you that I'm kind of a bit burnt out on Brene Brown right now. So I gave it 3 stars. I was a little bit disappointed, to be honest, because based off of what I know of her and her TED Talk and such, I was expecting more. I was expecting more actual help to be found in there, but it was more like, I don't know, it more felt like a support group rather than like cognitive behavioral therapy. They feel different, and I was expecting more, behavioral therapy, and she gave more support groups. So yes, I gave it 3 stars. I may read more from her later down the track, but it will be down the road because right now I'm a bit Brene Brown burnt out. So yes, that's that one. And then I went to the library this week and I found some graphic novels. They have graphic novels there. Here's the thing about graphic novels. They're expensive. I can't afford them. That's it. Like, I would love to read them. I would love to read Ms. Marvel, Saga. I'd like to read, memoir graphic novels. I just can't afford them. They're too expensive for me. But I went to the library and they had some there. They don't have a great selection. It's a very small selection, and like 90% of it is Superman comics or like, superhero comics, which I have no interest in. So I don't think it'll take long for me to sort of weed out all the ones that I'm interested in and read them, but whatever, I got to borrow some. So the first one I read was Pride and Prejudice, the graphic novel. Here's the thing about Pride and Prejudice, I don't like it. I find it very boring. I had to read Persuasion in school, and I actually really enjoyed it, because I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I assumed that there would be a happy ending, but all that in-between bit, I didn't know what was going to happen, and it was very fun to read and find out. But with Pride and Prejudice, which I tried to read after Persuasion, got halfway through, finished it, because it was, I stopped, because it was so boring and so predictable, because I already know the story. It's been modified and adapted, and it's just part of our culture that I already know everything there is to know about Pride and Prejudice. But when I saw this, you're probably wondering why I picked this up. I saw this and I was like, cool, 100 pages, I'll finally know the second half of the book. And I did, I read this. It was a perfectly fine graphic novel. I don't know, Pride and Prejudice isn't for me. And I can kind of separate Jane Austen's books into those two categories. On the one hand, there's Persuasion, Mansfield Park, and Northanger Abbey, which I know kind of nothing about. Obviously, I know Persuasion now, but I know nothing about these books, and I'm actually kind of interested in reading the other two that I haven't read. And then there's Sense and Sensibility, Emma, and Pride and Prejudice, which I know the stories, and I actually feel like Jane Austen being so prominent in our culture hinders my enjoyment of her, you know. It's kind of a bit of bad luck, I think, because I think I would enjoy her novels if they weren't so famous. But I can't think of another book like Pride and Prejudice that I know almost every single plot point. And I haven't seen the movies, I haven't seen the miniseries, it's just through, like, osmosis. I don't know, I can't think of another book. Even 1984 is this massively prominent book in our culture. I don't know the plot to it. I know about the Thought Police, I know about Big Brother, but I don't know the plot. I don't know how it ends, you know? I know how Pride and Prejudice ends. Anyway, back to the graphic novel. It was great. I enjoyed it much more than the novel because it was so much faster. And I'm glad that I actually read to the end, and now I definitely do know that I know, like, all of the plot to Pride and Prejudice. I gave this 2 stars, which is not any sort of... I really enjoyed the graphic novelness of it. I just didn't enjoy the story that much. Anyway, moving on. Then I picked up Serenity, Better Days and Other Stories. Okay, here's the thing. I watched Firefly and Serenity when I was a little kid. Like, I was like 10 or 11. And so I have a lot of fond memories of these stories. But now that I'm older, you know, I'm 20 now, I can see a lot of the problematic things in the series, like the sexism and the racism. Like, Joss Whedon is not the feminist god he thinks he is. But I picked this up because there's just such... I still have just such nostalgia for these characters, and it was wonderful to read stories about them again. But I can't ignore the problematic things that really stood out to me this time about how some of the characters are presented, and they just stand out like a sore thumb at this point. But I still really enjoyed it because I love these characters so much. They feel like they almost feel like childhood imaginary friends. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't know. So again, I gave this 3 stars because I did enjoy it, but through the lens of my much more mature eyes, I couldn't enjoy it as fully as I could as a child. So, yes, so those are the things that I read this week. I hope you had a great week. I will see you next week. How many times can I say week in a sentence? Bye bye, thank you for watching.